My name is Christina Warren. I'm a senior cloud developer at Microsoft. We are here in the beautiful Spring Studios in my favorite city, New York City. You can see a lot of stuff kind of happening in the background, and we've got some great conversations with some great people today to dive in a little bit more about what you just saw. First up, I'm going to talk to Mr. Corey Sanders.
Not one of the great people, just the
No, I think, well, you're both, right?
Oh,
like,
gosh,
I mean,
thank you.
honestly, you're both like one of the great people and, you know, the first guy
You
up.
have to say that.
I kind of do.
It's awkward.
Kind of do. No, so you're in charge of Azure Compute.
That's right. Yeah.
All right.
That's right.
So there was a bunch of big Azure stuff that was kind of announced today.
Yeah.
What's other than the fact that this was announced before, but we kind of got into it today. The fact that there are now 2 Azure Container Services.
Mm-hmm. They're spelled
services.
differently.
Okay. One has a K.
One is spelled with a K. Yeah.
Weirdly.
Awesome. Thanks for right out the gate. Right out the gate with that.
I mean, I'm sorry, but it's weird when you have 2 things, same name, one has a different acronym. Other than that stuff, what's the most exciting thing that you've seen?
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, not one of my better names, I'd probably say. But, I think what we saw today, it's a ton of things, actually, that we saw today that I'm super excited about. I think one that I particularly liked, I think the demo with showing the debugging of the container running in AKS, one of our container services.
Yes.
The one geared towards a fully managed Kubernetes service, that's hence the K.
The K is for Kubernetes, just so it's clear.
Is for Kubernetes.
But it's also, what's the word?
Homonym?
Homonym, yeah.
Is that right? I think that's
something like that, yeah.
Homonym for a misspelled word, though. So anyway, so container as part of that, and being able to do live debugging with that is super cool. So you can imagine a bunch of containers being deployed, and you can sort of work across multiple people and be able to debug your.
Yeah, no, Scott's demo was really cool.
I loved it. Yeah, Scott did a good job.
He did a really good job.
Super cool. And then I'm also a big believer. I love Cosmos DB. I talk about this all the time, and so Cosmos DB, I love that service, and the Cassandra support's going to be great.
So you're going to be doing a little bit of you've got a session coming up later.
I do have a session. Yeah, they let me have one.
Okay, that's great. That's really good. You're important enough, I think.
Sure,
I mean,
yeah.
you're one of the big Azure guys. So you're going to talk about stuff. What's the subject of your
so I'm going to do, basically going to walk through the progression of a full sort of existing application that's running on premises and move it into the cloud. And then I'm going to sort of containerize it, and then I'm going to modernize it by adding things like functions and Cosmos DB and logic apps and so on. And so I kind of walk throughout the talk the progression of sort of starting on-prem, moving to cloud, and taking it forward.
So it's basically for people who have existing apps that
Yeah.
are running existing code that might not be able to move completely to the cloud.
You got it.
But you want to be able to modernize certain parts.
That's right. So like you can take portions of it and I'll containerize it, I'll deploy it onto Service Fabric, and then I'll add different components to it to basically append more cloud native technologies like serverless technology with functions. So it's going to be great.
So what can you kind of say to, I guess, like C# developers who are hearing a lot about microservices, they're hearing a lot about containers, they're hearing a lot about this other stuff.
Yeah.
What is in it for them?
Yeah, absolutely. So actually my session's a great session for that reason. I think almost everything in it is .NET focused. And so I'm showing Service Fabric, which of course was originally created as a .NET service. We added additional support for Java and Linux as well, but originally internally was built to run microservice, .NET microservices. So I'm going to show that. I'm going to show Windows-based containers deployed on it, and then being able to do .NET code as part of functions as well. So it's pretty much actually on my entire session's .NET. So
awesome.
Should be fun.
So if you're an existing .NET guy and you're trying to kind of look, or girl, and you're looking at trying to modernize,
that's right.
App, maybe move some of it or all of it, to the cloud. Check out your.
Mine's the session, and it's at the same time as Nat's, and so just say mine's gonna be better for those people.
Okay,
pretty much everyone. Let's just say that.
Okay.
Let's just say that. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that, but.
Corey is saying don't deal with Nat session. We've got a question coming in from the audience.
Oh.
Is Visual Studio going to continue to be the IDE of Azure, or is it all about VS Code now? Yes. That's a really good question.
Oh yeah, and actually, what's funny, I only demo with Visual Studio today.
Yeah, I noticed that we've seen a lot of that. So,
yeah,
okay.
so I think it's going to be a combination. It absolutely is going to be a combination. I think I think the Visual Studio work again. I'm doing .NET, Visual Studio, Service Fabric, Windows in my session, and so I don't think I even show Visual Studio Code.
Interesting.
So I mean, look, it's all about choice and sort of familiarity, and I think with Visual Studio, it's got at least I'm more comfortable with Visual Studio, and so that's continue to be what I use, and certainly you're going to see a lot of advancements that we'll even show today.
But that's actually it brings into kind of a great segue, because there are a lot of people who are really familiar with Visual Studio, really love that as their IDE. They want to get on Azure, but they don't want to deal with the portal.
Right.
So what's in it for them? I mean, I'm just being honest. Sometimes you want to use a CLI. You don't want to have to go through all this stuff.
I love the portal.
I mean,
Okay, okay, fine. Okay, fine.
It's getting so much better.
We'll get into that later. We'll get into that later off camera. It sounds like we've got some issues to work out. Okay, yeah. So what was the question? Oh, yeah. So if they don't want to use the portal, yeah. So well, first of all, there's a lot of things, right? In Visual Studio, you can, and in fact, I'll show. I guess I'm just going to tell you all the things I'm showing.
Yeah,
I'm ruining the session.
No, you're not. You're giving everybody a preview to tune in to see the whole thing.
So like
movie
through
trailer.
Visual, I like this. Through Visual Studio, you can right-click and publish, and I'm going to show being able to do that to a Service Fabric cluster with containers. You can publish a Service Fabric microservice in the same way. I'm also going to debug functions in Visual Studio and then publish straight into Azure. In fact, other than going into Cosmos DB and mucking around with some of the data in there, I don't think I use the Azure portal through my session. So sounds like you would like it.
No, I mean, I just think it's cool for people who don't want to have to switch back and forth. If you're just wanting to stay
in one experience.
In one
Absolutely,
experience.
right. And then the other thing I do pop up PowerShell for a little bit.
Yeah,
so that
but that's fine because you're going to have PowerShell alongside Visual Studio. That makes sense.
That makes sense.
It's sometimes though jarring to be going from coding into a web browser, especially if you're not building depending on what
you're building. If it's not, So when I do go and show, because I am building a website, so I do go.
Okay, so that makes sense. You would already have it open. You could have the portal.
But I get the feedback. So I think through Visual Studio, there's a lot of things you can do. It's gonna be great.
Awesome. All right. So final question.
Okay.
Just got a little bit of time. What's the big difference between Cosmos DB and SQL Server?
Oh,
I know that's a huge question, but just give me
How much time do we have?
We only have 30 seconds.
Okay.
So you got to give me just like the bullet points.
Yeah. So I mean,
like specifically about Azure.
Yeah, so the simple sort of solution, Cosmos DB is a NoSQL-based solution. It runs actually now, starting with Cassandra, it runs a bunch of different languages that sit on top. SQL Server is, by its name, a SQL-based service solution.
Yeah.
SQL solution, more relational-based database, right? But a lot of common traits. You can global coverage, top of the line SLAs. So very similarities, but for different apps, you require different things. And sometimes, in fact, the app I'm going to show today, you can use both. And so I use SQL and Cosmos DB all in the same app.
Amazing. All right, thank you so much, Corey.
Okay.
And we're gonna now talk with some other people. Thank you so much. Check out Corey's session. It's gonna be really good if you want to learn more about modernizing your application and moving some of your stuff off-premise into the cloud a little bit. That's really good. Some of the other big things we saw this week was all about VSTS. And so I'm joined right now by Donovan Brown and Lori Lampkin from the VSTS team to talk a little bit about DevOps and some of the stuff that's happening. So how are you guys doing?
Doing great.
Good. Thanks so much for joining me. So we've got some questions saying, Azure Cloud Shell seems like it's a replacement from PowerShell. I don't know if you can answer this, or PowerShell stuff. Are we going to keep both environments, both Azure Cloud Shell and PowerShell? Can you speak to that at all? If you can't, that's okay.
Well, it's not really a DevOps question.
Yeah.
So I think that was a Corey question.
That was a Corey question? Okay, sorry about that. I apologize. Let me go into this.
I could make it up, though.
You can make it up. No, okay, actually, let's just talk about what you guys did announce. One of the big things was Azure DevOps projects. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, we're really excited about Azure DevOps projects. Just when you get started creating any Azure resource, you just fill out a few simple fields, and we'll hook up your entire DevOps pipeline for you. So you'll have code repository hosting, CI, CD, and application insights all hooked up. And all you did was fill out, name your project and pick what language, what framework, and you're good to go. So that's previewing just today. So you should go check it out on the Azure portal.
All right, check that out for sure. Now, behind the scenes, is that using VSTS or is it something else?
Absolutely.
It's using VSTS behind the scenes, and of course, with anything VSTS, you can pick and choose pieces of VSTS. So you can hook it up to a GitHub repository for source hosting as an example, and use the VSTS for the other pieces.
Cool. And is there like a way for people who use TFS to migrate to VSTS?
Yeah, we actually are announcing here today general availability of our data import tools for to migrate TFS instances right into VSTS. We have many customers who've already used that already, and we have very large enterprises that are using that.
Very cool. So what about these new command line tools? Do they only work on Windows?
Which command line tools specifically?
The CLI.
The new CLI, yeah.
VSTS is announcing our CLI here at this event. And no, it doesn't just work on Windows.
You can work on any. You got to remember this. I've always said this is not your daddy's Microsoft.
Yeah.
When I joined Microsoft was the first time I installed Linux, and I carry a Mac with me and a PC because everything that we do now has to work on all three platforms. So I can't imagine anything that we produce going forward that only works on one platform anymore. It's not the world we live in.
No, I mean, but it's great to hear that out loud, right? Because I
Sure.
think a lot of people still have in their mind that it was your daddy's Microsoft. So it's
Sure.
great for us to be talking the talk and walking the walk as we have with some of the other announcements.
Yeah, that's why I did a Java demo on stage today, because I don't think that people believe us. Right? We keep saying it, but they don't believe us. So I did a Java demo on stage today.
Yeah.
So that's great. So what are the benefits? Because you talked about how this is now general availability, the import tool. What is the benefit of moving from TFS to VSTS?
Well, there's many benefits. I think you could start with not having to host your own hardware, not having to do all the upgrades, keep your operating system up to date and all that sort of stuff. And also, you can get new updates every 3 weeks as we release Visual Studio Team services that frequently.
Yeah, I always describe it as everything you know and love about TFS with none of the maintenance. I mean,
Okay.
You get infinite scale, you get new features every 3 weeks, and you never have to back it up, you never have to restore it, you never have to upgrade it. You just use it. It has infinite scale, so as your team gets bigger, if with TFS, sometimes you'd have to migrate your TFS to a new infrastructure, and now you just keep using it, keep adding people, and we have the power of Azure to scale to whatever degree that we want. Like I said on stage, we can handle the Windows team, we can handle anyone.
Yeah, I mean that's a great case study. I mean, if you can do the Windows code base, which is now
It's the
all
largest
yes.
Git repository in the world. It's 25,000 active developers. It's millions of work items, and the number of builds and pull requests is just astonishing. Right? No one's doing the things that we're doing for the Windows team.
Awesome. So, because we're talking about DevOps, what are some good resources if you want to learn, if someone wants to learn how to implement all the new DevOps features? Because there's so much stuff to learn.
Sure. So visualstudio.com whack DevOps is obviously a great way to start because.
Okay, so that's visualstudio.com dash.
whack DevOps, yeah, /DevOps,
Yeah.
and then it'll give you the definition that we're all running with. It'll give you resources where you can go read. It'll give you links to quick starts on how to deploy the application that you want using a DevOps pipeline from Microsoft. And docs.microsoft.com is another resource that you can go directly to get more of a detailed look at what their features are actually doing. Channel 9 is obviously still a fantastic resource to go and find videos.
Channel 9,
exactly,
yeah.
to go and watch with the team that I'm on now, the CDA team. We're all about making sure that you have content that you can use to be successful.
So, we talked about how you can now, if you did want to migrate from TFS to VSTS, that's now an option. And that's obviously something that's really exciting for all the reasons you were laying out, especially as your company gets bigger. But, TFS 2018 is out now. So
And it's awesome.
So why should people upgrade? Because you can kind of understand people are maybe looking at both options. What's new with TFS 2018?
It's so similar to VSTS that when I fire up my VM, I get confused on which one that I'm in. It's that close, and that's why you'd want to upgrade, is because everything that you see me demo on stage using VSTS, you can now go back in and replicate on-premise. Now, again, the reasons that you'd want to upgrade from the older versions of TFS is to get to all the new features that we've added. But there's a whole other reason why you want to get off of TFS and inside of the cloud. But we understand that there's simple reasons that you need to stay on-prem, and that's why we're going to keep delivering TFS on-prem and keep bringing you great features every 3 months so that you can stay where you're comfortable, yet still use all the power that we give you here from Microsoft.
Okay, so that's really good to know.
Yeah, some highlights on TFS 2018 are things like the new release definition editor. We have improvements to the delivery plans features, and like Donovan was saying, we have new updates for a whole year that we've been doing on VSTS that are now available in our 2018.
That's great. So if you do have reasons for on-prem deployment, then upgrade to the DS 2018. But otherwise, there are a lot of reasons to move to VSTS.
Absolutely.
Speaking of that, there are a lot of analytic features with the analytics features with TFS. Is that something included in VSTS?
Yeah, we are showing in one of our podcast sessions here, we're going to show a demo. Greg Bohr is going to show it, that is a preview of our new analytics services that are coming out with VSTS. Basically, available today is you can hook up an OData feed and pull that into Power BI and be able to get some great charts that you can generate for yourself. But we're also going to have a set of subsetted views and that are available for you to do ad hoc reporting.
Okay.
And that is something that I imagine will go in preview in the next quarter or so.
Okay, so so more of that stuff is coming.
Yeah.
Something on one of the questions we have right now is, what about TFS source control? Are you guys looking at like TFVC or Git first?
Yeah, so we have both TFVC and Git. We will continue to have both TFVC and Git. Some people prefer a centralized version control system. Some people prefer a distributed one.
Right.
And we will offer both of those choices.
Bill Walter in the comments is asking, does the DevOps pipeline only work with GitHub, or can you also work with TFS source control?
Oh my goodness, it works with so many different source control systems. I'm kind of interested in why anyone thinks it only works with GitHub. It works with it works with Bitbucket. It works with our own Git support. It works with TFVC. It works with Subversion. It works with you name it.
Mercurial?
What's really interesting is that you can actually leave your code pretty much where it is and start to use all the power that we have inside of Visual Studio Team Services. You don't have to literally lift and shift and abandon all the investments you've made in your current tool chain. What I tell everyone to do is find that part that hurts the most in your pipeline and let Visual Studio Team Services come and fill that gap for you. And what you're going to quickly realize is that the more of it that you use, the more value that you get. And hopefully you're going to be able to reduce your number of vendors that you use in your pipeline. When you can reduce that, you reduce this integration tax that you're constantly paying. As every vendor upgrades a feature, it's on you to make sure that it still works. But when you use all of VSTS, we're the ones paying that tax for you. We're making sure that everything integrates. Your developers now get to focus on delivering value and not focus on their tool chain. That should be something that just works. It should not be something that you're focused on. So yes, it works with all of those, but replace them as fast as you can with VSTS. I mean, that's pretty much the bottom line.
All right, that's what Donovan is saying. It works with everything, but replace with VSTS.
Yes, you'll thank me later.
Is there an out-of-the-box service for migrating from DFS to VSTS?
That is our data import
that's
service.
The data import
that's
tool.
available, general availability. You can go check it out on the visualstudio.com.
Okay, so that's available. So that's available now.
Available to everyone. Production ready.
Yeah.
I had another question that basically, find this, are some of the new, because we talked before about DevOps projects, is that only available to paid account users, or how does that work?
Ooh, interesting.
No, so the DevOps project is just a free service as part of Azure.
Okay.
It uses VSTS on the back end, for things like, running your CI/CD and running builds. VSTS has free private repos for up to 5 users, and we give you 2 hours of hosted build minutes for free as well every month. So as you start and you grow and you learn, you're able to have a free experience with all of that.
Okay, that's great. We've got let's use some other questions. What's the benefit of using the DevOps process for using automated gates for RM?
Oh my goodness, that gives you an automated way of doing safe deployment. Safe
Okay.
deployment is a practice where you deploy inside of a particular environment and you monitor the health of that environment. But we traditionally monitor that health manually. Someone is reading telemetry, someone is getting alerts, someone is going off and checking for issues. And if and only if that human being decides that things are good, do you then promote to the next environment. We all know that the fact that I said human being, that's an issue. And we want to basically never send a human being to do a machine's job. And now we have the technology that can monitor the telemetry for us and give us the signal that it is safe or not safe. So being able to use the gates frees your developers, again, to go focus on delivering value and not reading numbers that can be read by a machine instead.
Yeah.
I really like how you put that, is that use humans do human work and not something that a machine
Yes,
should be
because
doing.
there's things that humans are really good at. We're bad at a lot of stuff, right? And we need to stop letting us do the things that we're bad at and let the machines do that for us.
Someone says that when will the deployment gate feature, when will it be released on-prem? Is that part of TFS 2018?
No, it's not part of 2018. It's just in preview today
just in
here
preview
on
today.
the service.
Okay.
So usually we let those things bake and go public. We call it general availability, and then they go into our next release of TFS. So
Okay.
it'll be a quarter or two, before you're seeing it there.
Okay.
That's another example of why you want to get to VSTS, right? Because you don't have to ask questions like that. When can I use the feature? The second that we release it.
Yep.
As soon as you turn on that feature flag, you have access to it. And you don't have to wait for us to, as she said, go GA and then package it in a release that we're going to deliver for the on-prem product. And then you still have to find time to schedule to upgrade your TFS to take advantage of that feature. So, I mean, VSTS is just, if you can get there, it's a no-brainer. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for talking to us about this, and make sure you check out everything that's new with VSTS and
Thanks for
TFS.
having us.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Appreciate it.
much. All right, next up, we're going to talk about some other stuff. We're going to get into AI, which was obviously a huge part of the keynote. Seth Juarez went on and on and on about all the new stuff that we have with AI. He's actually in the room right now. He's kind of like laughing off to the side, but Seth is completely obsessed with AI, and there was a lot of really big stuff that was announced. So that's going to be exciting. We're going to be speaking with some people about some of the new tools for AI and AI on the Edge browser. So we're just getting people in gear, but this is all good stuff. So I'm joined right now, actually, speaking of what I was just saying, talking about AI stuff, I'm joined by Lance Olson and Joseph Srush. How are you guys doing?
Good. How's it going?
Good. So tell me more about these Visual Studio tools for AI.
So let me take the question.
Yeah.
You know, we believe AI is in the future for every developer. And we really want to make it very easy for every developer to use their favorite tools for doing that task. So Visual Studio Tools for AI brings AI into your familiar IDE, the great Visual Studio Tools environment. It allows you to develop with any of these open source tools like CNTK, TensorFlow, Cognitive Toolkit, Caffe, and so on. It gives you lots of templates, allows you to develop these models and scale them out on the cloud so you can execute at scale. Then from the same IDE environment, you can stitch together a full entire application deployed in the cloud, and all from that easy-to-use IDE.
Yeah, a couple other things I really like about it. One is it manages the training, the job submission of the training for the AI jobs that you're working on, and will submit them and manage the resources against the Azure Batch AI service.
Okay.
And then another one is if you're using GPUs, you want to get the most out of every bit of hardware that you have, and it comes with a GPU heat map that actually shows you kind of different colors for how well is the hardware that you're working on being utilized, so that you can look at that and then tweak it to get the most out of the system that you're using.
So tell me more about AI on the Edge.
Yeah, so we have some really exciting things happening there. And what we mean by AI on the Edge is this is in line with what Satya has talked about when he says intelligent cloud and intelligent edge. And so AI on the Edge is how we get that intelligence into the Edge. And there are a few key things we're doing this week actually to enable that. One of them is any models that you've built in Azure Machine Learning can be deployed seamlessly to an Azure IoT Edge device.
Okay.
And that really enables you to do all kinds of things you couldn't do before, like run AI to detect changes that are happening locally, like in a factory or in a hospital. If you have data that, let's say, can't leave the network there, you can actually build the AI in the cloud, but then deploy it and have it run right in servers on the edge there in the hospital and operate over the data there locally to make faster decisions and decisions within the network boundaries that you have.
Cool.
Yeah, and think also about putting AI on a phone.
Yeah.
Right? And imagine if the AI just runs locally on the phone, even when it is not connected to the cloud. It can run really fast. You run with images on the phone, for example. That's very powerful. So AI at the Edge is a couple of things. Really about taking the capability to run AI models, developed ones in the cloud, right? That might take a lot of data and a lot of compute. But then once you develop the models, go put it on a phone, go put it on an IoT Edge device, run it locally, and it runs blazingly fast.
And that way, even if you don't have that internet connection, you can still access those things, which I think, especially for IoT devices, becomes really important because you might not always have a strong connection to something. That's really interesting. So we've got some questions coming in on the stream. Someone's asking, data, we keep talking about intelligent apps and AI is building intelligence, and that can be kind of confusing. So what's the difference?
Oh, it's a good question. So think about intelligence as a little bit more general. So if you were to take your historical data and you build reports on it, or you build deep analytics and joins on it, you are actually extracting intelligence from data about patterns that happened in the past. But that's a little bit like looking in the rearview mirror.
Right.
And AI allows you to look forward.
Okay.
And so AI allows you to
predictive
be
and
predictive.
Yeah, so this is what's going to happen in the future based on the data cues we might have in the past.
So you've built models from the historical data for AI that capture some general aspects of how systems are working. Then you're predicting forward, and so you can put into action. That's the difference.
Very cool. We've got another question saying, I love the IoT devices today as a young developer. I think everybody does. They're a great way to hack on things and really there's so much cool stuff we can do with that hardware. Will Microsoft be creating any AI-powered IoT devices for new builders to add intelligence to stuff?
Do you want to take that?
Yeah, so one of the areas that we're really focused on is actually pre-built AI that you can integrate right into devices. So one of the scenarios, for example, is in our cognitive services, we have a service that is called Custom Vision. It lets you train your own model. We did an example where we uploaded pictures of cheese pizzas, pepperoni pizzas, and combo pizzas. and you actually just upload maybe 10 or 20 images of each type, and then from then you can feed it one of those a new image of any of those 3 kinds of pizza, and it will tell you this is that kind of pizza. And you can actually take that model and export the model and then deploy it right into a phone, and it will run on the phone, and then that way on your phone device you'll have a pre-built model that can, in that case, detect pizzas, but really it can be anything. We've done it with...
It could be hot dogs?
It could be hot dogs versus
Silicon Valley
hamburgers.
fans out there.
Yeah, or like traffic flow. We've done one with medium, heavy, and light traffic, and then then you just go to any freeway and take a picture, and it will tell you whether that's medium, heavy, or light traffic.
That's really cool. I mean, that could change a lot of things about what your plans are, and that's really smart. Is there a place for people to learn more of the traditional math programming tools like linear and integer optimization?
So it's an interesting question. So
I get that a lot from people. They I really want to know about AI, but where can I get the math?
Yeah,
where can I learn about math
look,
stuff?
AI today, machine learning is really a very scientific discipline. It integrates many optimization capabilities into it. There are cases where you have predictions coming from lots of AI models. You might apply integer programming or other optimization, say, to make logistics better. So you may have predictive logistics, for example. So those tools are all part of the tool chest that you should totally deploy, which is why, languages like Python and R, they have a collection of libraries that facilitate a lot of these, right? And so you integrate that in along with the AI and build even more powerful systems.
I would just add two places I would want people to think about in terms of where we've really invested in content to help people learn.
Yeah.
One is aischool.microsoft.com, and that's a set of training that we've put together that does everything from kind of overviews for how to get started in AI all the way to how to go deep on things like deep learning. And then also azure.com/AI is where you can find basically all the tools, services, and infrastructure investments that we have for AI. So those two, aischool.microsoft.com and azure.com/AI.
Check that out. All right, and that's definitely something that I know a lot of people, they want to get started. They don't know where to go, so AI School and azure.com/AI. We've got another question coming in from the stream asking, do you plan to invest into offline libraries for your main AI solutions in the cloud? And you kind of touched on that a little bit, but many users have disconnected scenarios. So can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, it's a great question. This is why we have had the Microsoft ML Server as a vehicle. So Microsoft ML Server blends R, Python, a lot of our machine learning algorithms, some cognitive capabilities as well, and it's shipped in a server form factor. So it runs with SQL Server.
Okay.
If you buy SQL Server, you get Microsoft ML Server. And it's also cross-platform. It runs on Hadoop, it runs on Linux, Windows, everywhere. So if you have a completely disconnected scenario, you can still build and deploy machine learning and AI models with Microsoft ML Server. So that's one very, very good thing. So we will continue to invest into libraries that go into Microsoft ML Server, as well as wrapped up in the cloud in fully managed services, right? That's the story.
Very cool.
The other thing that I would add for this week is that we also announced the AI toolkit for Azure IoT Edge, which is actually a set of packages and libraries and scripts that actually show you exactly how to take a model and run it offline on an IoT Edge device.
Okay, that's really cool. And I think that for a lot of people who, in those scenarios like you're talking about, who are completely disconnected, that'll be really useful.
Yeah.
We've got somebody who's using the name Confused AI saying, have to ask, sorry. There's Cortland, there's Cognitive Framework, there's the Cognitive Toolkit. Yeah. It's confusing, so can we make this easier to understand?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. See, the AI world is innovating so rapidly. There are so many terms. Likewise, Microsoft is innovating very rapidly. What I think people should think about is think about the Microsoft AI platform as having a large collection of features. There is cognitive services, that is a collection of features for pre-built AI. So they're pre-built things like speech, translation, vision, and so on. So it's pre-built for you. It's easy to integrate. It's like a sort function call. Okay? So that's cognitive services. Cognitive toolkit is for developing deep learning models from ground up, from raw data. That requires expertise, right? And not your average developer.
Right, they're not going to have it.
Yeah, it's going to be a bit of a challenge, right? But you have to provide that capability for the sophisticated developers. So think about it as pre-built AI and custom AI and bot framework for conversational AI. So 3 buckets, and in which are lots of features.
That's great. Are the LUIS models, are they available for edge deployments?
Oh yeah, it's one of the things that we are thinking about. There are a number of areas where people want to operate intelligent conversations at the edge. It is part of our roadmap. We don't have a committed date.
So this is I'm going a little off script, just preparing you guys. But one thing that Seth Juarez and I have talked a lot about is with the importance of AI is kind of thinking about how we can create models that aren't inherently biased. Because a lot of times there's been some studies. The Scientific American had something recently. There have been some other things looking about how inherent bias in our models can make our future even more biased. So what can we do to kind of stop that? What do you guys think? I mean, this might be more of a philosophical question, but I just had to ask.
Yeah, I've got a couple thoughts on that. One is, if you go to, and I'll sound like a broken record here, but if you go back to azure.com/AI and you click on the Azure Machine Learning page and then click on the documentation, there's a link there called in the how-to tutorials called the data science process. And what we've done there is actually documented the best practices for how our data scientists work and actually outlined a process that ensures the best result. And its bias is one example of where the process can go wrong if you don't actually make sure you have the right steps in place. And then there are other things like you can have overfitting on a model where the data that you train on is the same data that you're using to predict, and then you think the model's accurate, but then in reality it's not. And this process is really what we've created to help people kind of have a step-by-step way to run their actual team and to run the way they build data science to avoid issues like bias. Another thing is we also have invested in an approach that actually allows you to have fine-grained control over the deployment of the models. We can put them into a Docker container and then actually plug those into a workflow. So some of our customers will have actually regulatory inspection for the models before they can get deployed to ensure they don't have bias. And we support that in the workflow and how we operationalize models so that you can actually build checks and balances into the flow itself.
All right, thanks guys so much. So that's check out aischool.microsoft.com and check out azure.com/AI if you want to learn more about AI. And we've got more stuff coming up. So there's been so much happening around this keynote, around Connect. There was a bunch of stuff that we talked about around data, around both Cosmos and Microsoft SQL and our partnership with Databricks. And we're going to sit down right now and I'm going to speak with Laura about data. So how are you?
I'm doing very well. How are you?
Good.
Good.
So there were a bunch of big, exciting announcements today. Some of them, a lot of them around open source technologies in Azure.
Right.
So can we start with the Databricks?
Oh, Databricks was a great announcement. I'm so excited about what we've done.
Oh, and I've got Carol here too.
Carol's here.
Thank you.
I'm so excited about the work we've done with Databricks to bring their environment on Azure as a first-class citizen right within the portal. So what we showed off and what we announced today was our the Databricks availability of their solution right within the portal. You can go in, you can build out your data pipeline, an intelligent data pipeline. You can have a collaborative environment with Databricks. It's fantastic how you can have multiple engineers and data scientists and developers working within the same model. It's a great solution and to have that so readily available and easy to deploy is such a big win for our customers.
Awesome. That's awesome. No, and we're going to be talking later this session with the CEO of Databricks to talk a little more about.
Yes.
So stay tuned if you want to learn more about that.
They're doing some great work.
No, they really are, and it's a really exciting space. Yep. There was another big announcement, Carol. I'm going to go to you on this one about Cassandra as a service powered by Azure Cosmos DB. So do you want to talk a little bit about what this means for Cassandra developers?
Yeah, I'm really excited about this. Cassandra is a very popular open source database for large-scale, real-time data solutions. And with Cosmos DB offering Cassandra API, we're really bringing Cassandra as a service to Cassandra developers. You can take your app, no single line of code changes required. You can bring that up to Cosmos DB and enjoy a fully managed stack where you don't have to worry about memory, CPU, VMs, globally distributed so that you can, with one click on a map, you can bring it anywhere in the world where your users are. And it takes minutes as opposed to setting up a replica cluster, by definition, takes days. You get fully elastic scale. Again, instead of thinking about compaction or worrying about disk I/O or CPU or memory and adding and tuning config, with Cosmos DB, you give us a throughput, and we guarantee it with SLAs. And speaking about the SLAs, Cosmos DB is the only service that gives you not only guarantee on availability, which is 5 nines with today's announcement.
Okay.
That's pretty unique.
Yeah.
That means literally over a year, you may, in aggregate, maybe get up to 5 minutes of issues, if at all. But it also offers you SLAs, 4.9 SLAs for throughput, latency, consistency, which is no other service in the cloud does. And all of this goodness will bring to Cassandra developers without any work on their part. They could just take, and it also comes with a side benefit that there is no lock-in. Now, they don't need to change their application, and if for some reason they decide to distribute their application to more clouds, etc., there is no risks, there is no concern on their side. They can keep their open source investments and benefit from the openness of open source investments while taking advantage of these Cosmos DB capabilities.
So let me make sure I have that correct. So they're bringing their existing Cassandra app over to the service, but if for some reason they wanted to leave Azure or do something else, they wouldn't have to. It wouldn't be. There's not lock-in. They wouldn't be.
Exactly. It's just open source APIs. That's the beauty of open source, and we bring what we are good at. We're providing this highly scalable, great services, and welcoming folks to continue using and embracing the open source flexibility of the open source.
So
best of both worlds.
So speaking of open source, another announcement that was made today is the fact that Microsoft is joining the MariaDB Foundation, and that's, for me, as somebody who's been following MariaDB, I'm sure you guys too, since the beginning. Like 9 years ago, when MariaDB kind of started off, I don't think that I never anticipated that Microsoft would be offering a managed service with it, or that we'd be part of the foundation. Can you talk a little bit about the importance of that and how this kind of came about?
Yeah, I think we believe in two principles. One is openness. We want to join where developers are. We want to contribute. We want to add value. We joined Linux Foundation a year ago.
Yeah.
We announced MySQL as a service at Build. Now we're coming in and joining MariaDB Foundation with following the same principle. It doesn't matter whether it's a Windows technology or Linux technology. It doesn't matter. It's developers using it. We want to make developers happy, and we want to contribute what we know. We have experience with building databases. At the same time, we also like to offer developers choice. You want to use Maria database? We can offer them Maria database as a service. Again, the value of open source meets the value of our experience in offering truly managed services. Again, developers get the best of both worlds.
Very great. I love that. I mean, that's one of the things that I really love about working at Microsoft in this era is our commitment to open source and the fact that we really are going into those communities, like you said, with whatever developers are using, we want to be there. Going back to Microsoft SQL for a second, Laura, can you talk about the SQL Operations Studio?
Oh, that was great. I had the opportunity to show that off today, and we announced it's now available for download. Operations Studio is a free tool. It's a development and database management tool. Can connect to any of your SQL Server environments on-prem in the cloud, and it runs on every operating system, Linux, Windows, and Mac. It couples together the great things that you get out of VS Code. It's actually based on VS Code, so you get that rich developer experience, and it brings in the things that you need from the database. When you're writing database code, you have a special set of tools and capabilities. There are execution plans. You're drilling into different parts of the engine to understand how your code is executing. And this brings all of that together. And it can run on any environment. So we really needed that. As we started bringing SQL Server 2017 to Linux, we're certainly seeing how we're expanding out to just be able to provide support for every operating system, reach developers wherever they are, and the Operations Studio was just another step in that direction. Some additional things I didn't get a chance to show, it also combines command line, and you can run Bash, you can run PowerShell in there, all within an integrated environment.
That's cool.
I know, it's great.
That's really cool.
Great. So you don't have to leave that one environment. You have everything you need right within that one integrated environment to develop, deploy, troubleshoot, manage, tune, everything, all of your data assets.
All of your data in one place.
Yep.
Is that why it's a separate product from some of the Visual Studio stuff?
Yeah, and it's again available out on GitHub. We welcome people's contributions to this. it is a special audience. There is a special audience, and we do find that we have Management Studio, and we have Visual Studio, and we have Visual Studio Code, and we have now Operations Studio, and we're not moving away from any of those other tools. We're going to continue to support them, evolve them, improve them, move them forward, and this was just another audience that we felt was important for Microsoft's customers to be successful. So.
That's great, especially since you said it's open source, it's on GitHub, it works on all platforms. Is it going to follow a similar model that VS Code has had when it comes to taking commits and rolling out updates and that sort of thing?
I believe so, yes.
That's really cool. That's really cool.
Yep.
This was another question. We just answered Douglas from the comments. He said since it's built on VS Code, will it be open source as well? And you just answered that. It is. You can go to GitHub, download it, make commits, and it works on all platforms. This is a question from the comments. When will Cosmos DB accept large documents?
That's a great question. So today we accept up to 2 meg, and we're going to bring it further. You can already today work with either use the attachment feature for really large data with Cosmos DB, or you can chunk your documents. But we're working on it, so we'll keep expanding as customers asking us for.
Okay, that's great. And there's another question, which was basically, like every cloud database claims that they're cloud scale. What makes our NoSQL solution better?
Well, I think the important part is the global distribution and elastic scale. It's not about the cloud scale. It's the two facts. That one is that you can, with a click on a map, you can bring data anywhere in the world, transparently to you. That's no other database does. The second important aspect is the fact that it's completely elastic to you. So, as you store data, data can keep growing. You don't need to do anything. You don't need to create your shards, etc. You don't need to manage your shards. Cosmos DB will continue service your CRUD requests. It doesn't matter how much data you store. If it's a petabyte, it'll just continue growing. And throughput, which we scale independently from the storage, you set the throughput you need, and we guarantee it with SLA. Doesn't matter how much data you are storing. Again, the scale out is done transparently to you. You do not need to manage shards, which is a very unique and different characteristics from existing Mongo as a service solutions or as a cloud databases.
Okay, that makes sense. This is a question. Does the SQL Server on Linux have the exact same feature set as Windows, or what are the differences?
There are some differences, and we're continuing to work on the roadmap to bring everything over to the Linux. So the large, and obviously you can find this information online on our website. So there's definitely going to, in the documentation.
Is there like a table
largely,
someplace?
Yes, there's absolutely a table. But largely there's, you're looking at things like reporting services, analysis services. Those haven't been ported over. And then you'll find some nuances for other things, but we're continuing to bring everything over. So it's definitely our intention to make it complete parity between the environments, and as well as continue to make big investments in Windows.
Yeah, that's going to be my next question. Another question comes in is like, somebody says, is the Windows version going to be stopped being made? And we know the answer. That's no.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about, for the Windows developers out there, what some of the investments you're making in that stuff are going forward?
Well, right now we just released SQL Server 2017, so we're on track to keep moving forward with that GA, and we'll. I don't really have the list of things that are coming.
No, that's totally fine. That's totally fine. So before, when we were talking about the SQL Operations Studio, which again is really cool, you were talking about some of the CLI tools. Can you go into some details about that?
Once more.
Sorry, some of the CLI tools that are part of the SQL Operations Studio.
Right. So within the Operations Studio, it supports, like I said, the integrated environment
for
Bash
scripting,
Bash script and
PowerShell.
As well as PowerShell. So you can just go right into the tool and open up that integrated scripting environment. You can run that right within the tool. And
can you specify what type of Bash you want, or is it just using whatever Bash is installed?
I'm not entirely certain. I will have to double check on
Okay.
that.
I was just curious because some people are like really particular.
They are
about
absolutely.
So all right.
Absolutely.
But you know what? It's open source, so
It is.
so if your favorite isn't supported, then you could always have a commit there. So.
Absolutely.
All right. Cool. Well, this has been awesome. Thank you guys both for talking to us about what's happening with data at Microsoft, both from Cosmos side and the SQL operations stuff. This has been fantastic. So. Obviously, we're talking a lot about different tooling and things. We just learned about SQL Operations Studio. A bunch of stuff was announced today at Connect all around the Visual Studio family. And within our Visual Studio family, we have a ton of stuff. There's Visual Studio Code, there's Visual Studio the IDE, there's Visual VSTS, which we talked about earlier with the DevOps teams. And was some amazing demos on the Visual Studio side, both on VS Code. And there's also Xamarin, of course, Visual Studio for Mac. A lot of different things talking about making development better. And so I'm really excited to be talking with Amanda Silver and John Montgomery from the Visual Studio team to talk about some of this stuff. So this is a really loaded question. I kind of gave an overview a second ago, but give me a rundown of everything that was announced today. I don't know that there was a ton, but if you just want to give me the highlights. You don't have to go all the features, just the big brick items, just so we can kind of recap people who are tuning in.
So there was a ton.
Yeah, there was so much. It was the first hour, basically.
It was the first hour, and it started with Chris Dias kind of kicking off VS Code, doing these amazing things where he was showing Visual Studio Live Share, where we had Visual Studio and Visual Studio Code, and Amanda here on stage, kind of doing co-editing and co-debugging. That was pretty impressive. He was showing off some of the VS Code integration with Azure to be able to deploy things. He touched super, super lightly on the integration between Visual Studio Code and the Cosmos DB that was going on, and the Graph API that we announced later in the session. I think later we had Scott Hanselman. He came out and he showed off the Visual Studio connected environment for AKS, where he was actually demoing running his application in a live Kubernetes non-production cluster. It's a dev cluster that the whole team could be able to use, which basically gives you kind of F5 interloop performance against a live Kubernetes cluster, which eliminates some of the problems you get when you have your production versus your development environment, and the drift you can get when you start to mock out interfaces and so on. James Montemagno came out and he showed some amazing stuff with the Xamarin Live player, the ability to embed .NET inside a Swift application, which is super, super slick.
That was one of my that was one of my favorite things to see, and I was already thinking about all my iOS dev friends who might already do other things now. If you are trying to work on an app that's already pre-built in something else.
Yep. I think they call it the Embedinator 4000.
Yeah, Embedinator 4000.
Gotta love Miguel. He has a great skill for naming things. There was the general availability of Visual Studio App Center. Man, what else was there?
I'm thinking about it. I mean, there was then I think that was everything that was in the Visual Studio family, and then there was some announcements later in the keynote that were around the data tools.
Yeah.
That were actually, some of them were based on Visual Studio Code.
Yeah, we just talked with Laura about that,
exactly.
Which is really cool.
And super slick also was the Visual Studio tools for AI, which actually I think Seth went into more detail on. That's very, very slick. If you have any interest in doing machine learning, stuff like that, you should grab the tools. I think they just actually uploaded an update to it yesterday.
Okay.
So super fresh. Very, very cool stuff.
That's great. Let's talk a little bit about the live share environment. What would you guys think? Because you were part of the demo. What would be the perfect use case, do you think, or the ideal use case for using something like this?
Well, I mean, it actually was inspired by doing hundreds of interviews with developers that are kind of, at the leading edge of what they're doing and trying to understand what challenges they currently have. And collaboration continues to be one of the biggest problems in development. When it comes to having more distributed teams and dealing with remote programmers, a lot of people really enjoy pair programming. And that's something that a lot of people like to do either next to each other or, remotely.
Right.
And either in a remote case or even next to each other, there are disadvantages with the solutions that exist today. For example, remotely, there's a video online. I love this one where they have probably 6 different devices that they've hooked up to facilitate their remote pair programming session. And even in one case, for a kind of local pair programming session, what they had was a whole bunch of keyboards and mice kind of going as multi-inputs into the same kind of operating system so that everybody could have their own ability to do that. And so, screen sharing, I think today it can be laggy, and there's
usually a lot of lag, no matter what solution you use. And every new one promises no lag. There usually is some, yeah.
Right, but not only that, you actually have to give up some of your control to allow somebody to help you out with a bug, for example. And so what's cool about live share is that you actually can use your own machine. You don't have to share the other apps on your machine. They don't have to see what's going on on your screen. But also, in terms of your coding editor, you actually get to use all of the settings and hotkeys and things like that that make you super productive.
Because I mean, there's nothing worse than like trying to use someone else's machine to help them out and like, okay, my key bindings are all different, my theme is different, nothing looks the way that I need it to look, and that can make it hard to pair program, right? To make it to even make changes or suggestions or whatever.
Right.
The coolest part of the demo for me is when Chris starts the debugging session and shares it with Amanda, and Amanda is able to set breakpoints, step in, step over, see what's in the call stack. I mean, there's some magic there in the way the Visual Studio debugger works and the debugger protocol across the two products works. That's kind of impressive tech.
Yeah. And then one of the things too with this is that you can use. It works across the Visual Studio family, right? So you can use it if you're using Visual Studio on Mac or on Windows, or if you're using VS Code, it works, right?
So today we've gotten it to work with Visual Studio and Visual Studio Code.
Okay.
But we expect that this capability, which is based on kind of the language server protocol and the remote debug protocol that we already have working in our products, will come to VS for Mac as well.
Okay. All right. So it's not available for VS for Mac now, but that it seems likely that's
VS. It's a VS family.
It's a VS family function. All right. That's good. We've got a question from the stream saying, does the Visual Studio team, do you help build all the tools that are inside of it, or do other teams help out too?
Oh, we have actually probably hundreds of teams that actually contribute to Visual Studio. So for example, the Visual Studio Tools for AI was a collaborative effort across multiple teams.
Actually started in MSR, went to the AI&R team. They talked with us about how to actually plug in and hook the best way. On top of that, obviously, we ship a bunch of non-Microsoft tech in there.
Yeah.
If you're doing Xamarin development, when you do the installation, you get the Android SDK installed for you. So it's not just Visual Studio. One of the things that setup does is it actually goes out and it fetches like third-party products and tools to put them on your desk and get it all set up so your dev system is basically the way you want it.
Well, not only the way you want it, but also very current.
Yep.
So that's one of the things that we do is kind of make sure that we're curating what are the most current APIs that are appropriate for you to target.
Doug R says that the live coding thing is amazing. Yes, it totally is. Will it work with the web? Like, can someone edit in VSTS and see the changes? Is this something that's going to maybe come to future versions?
Web, yeah. So, I mean, there's a lot of different scenarios that we want to go enable. I mean, the list is long, and we're very ambitious in terms of what we'd like to enable. I think, down the road, being able to have some kind of web-based editor that could contribute into it certainly seems like a possibility that we would consider. It's not currently what we've implemented, but definitely something that we would consider down the road.
Someone else said, is live coding product, is that going production? Is that ready now or next year? Or is this a longer roadmap like?
Well, so, I mean, this is one of those kinds of features and functionality that requires a tremendous amount of testing on the actual bits to make sure that it's reliable enough to kind of use in a production setting. And so, co-authoring is actually one of the most complex problems that you can have in software.
I mean, it's in anything. I mean, you see it all the time, even with writing apps. I mean, there's still it's 2017, and making sure you're not rewriting something or overwriting something is difficult. And that's just with text. When you're talking about code, especially in a production environment. I mean, we finally figured stuff out with Git, but if you're trying to do the collab thing, I mean, it can make I can't even imagine the logistical challenges around that.
And we're trying to definitely learn from the Office 365 team and things like that have been enabling collaboration on text documents and spreadsheets for a couple of years now. But in a lot of ways, a coding environment is really different because you have multiple files that can actually impact whether or not an edit is valid, right? And so we need to actually incorporate that into kind of how we do it. And to make sure that it's robust and kind of a great experience, we need actually a lot of people to test it and use it and give us feedback on it. So over the next year, we will kind of continue to work on getting it more and more robust and basically broadening the set of users that we have.
Okay, cool. Yeah. And live share, when is that going to be available?
So we expect that we'll have we'll open the private preview and kind of ratchet it up over time, starting in the beginning of next calendar year.
Okay.
And then we hope that we will have a public beta, sometime in the spring next year, and then kind of bring it to GA as soon as we can, as soon as we believe it's robust.
But that's the important thing, right? Is making sure that it's going to hold up to what it needs to do.
Exactly.
This is another question from the comments. Kind of earlier, you were saying that the live share, right now it's between Visual Studio on Windows and VS Code, and Mac is on the pipeline. Do you have any plans of potentially working with other IDEs like Eclipse?
Potentially. We really have not yet figured out all of the different configurations that we'd want to enable it in. So that certainly is something that we'd consider and kind of look at.
And this was another question. How many C++ developers are using Visual Studio.NET and .NET Core? Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, there are millions. I think we'll talk about, Julia Lewison has a general session later today, and she'll talk about some of the momentum around Visual Studio. We have in the neighborhood of 5 million active developers every month. Well over 1 million of them use C++. 3-4 million of them are using C#.NET. And a ton of those are using .NET Core. I don't actually remember the number off the top of my head, but it's in excess of 1 million at this point. So the numbers are growing very, very healthily. So yeah.
Okay, and do you know anything about the future of C++ for .NET?
You mean the managed extensions for C++?
Yes.
That hasn't been an area of active development for a while. We make sure it keeps working. We have teams inside Microsoft that depend on it. I think we have found that .NET found its home very much with C#, and C++ has found a bunch of different things it does really, really well. The work we've been doing lately to get to our C++ standards compliance has received a lot more positive customer response than the work we really invested heavily on in the .NET area. But that still works, the managed extensions.
This has been such a great talk with you guys. We didn't even really get to talk on the connected environment stuff that Scott Hanselman showed off in his demo with AKS. Can you just tell me, when that's going to be generally available? Do you have an idea? When is that going to be generally available?
It's actually in a very similar situation to where live share is.
Okay.
It's a private preview right now. We're going to invite people in. We need to get it right. Nobody's ever built anything quite like this, so we're going to phase it out into kind of a public beta probably next spring, and then see where it goes from there.
That's really great. I mean, and when I look at everything that you guys announced, which at the beginning of the session, like this interview, huge list, what it seems like is that a lot of this is all around making the development process easier and kind of going to fitting those pain points that make it more challenging. So
exactly.
So that's awesome. So thanks both of you for talking about that. And you can check out all the new stuff at visualstudio.com, I assume?
Visualstudio.com.
Visualstudio.com. Awesome.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. So we are now coming in to talk about some other stuff. One of the things that we talked about with Laura and Carol was the new partnership between Microsoft and Databricks, and that's super exciting. There's a lot of really good stuff going on with that. In just a couple of moments, we're going to be speaking with the CEO of Databricks about that partnership and some of the things that are happening there. You can go ahead and ask questions. If you have questions about the session, you can leave those on the stream. After this session ends, after these interviews are over, we're going to go straight into the main breakout sessions where you can learn more about some of these products. And some of that stuff includes things we've talked about earlier in the interview. But right now, we're going to go ahead and I'm going to speak with Rohan Kumar and Ali from Databricks. How are you guys?
Great.
Great. Lots of stuff announced today. Congratulations on the partnership announcement. That's really, really big. Can you tell us a little bit more about bringing Databricks to Azure?
Yeah, I mean, I think this partnership has been going on for more than a year now. Where, for us, from a Microsoft standpoint, it was we actually, did a lot of research to figure out that Spark was one of the most popular compute engines, and then, after that, it was a no-brainer, to sort of work with Databricks that actually created Spark. And I think ever since then, this, obviously there's been a lot of back and forth and, working on the technical alignment, but just the overall vision of, building the modern data warehouse with Azure Databricks, what we have with Azure Storage and ADL, and finally the SQL Data Warehouse was the reality that's sort of come together in a beautiful way.
That's awesome. So Ali, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, about Databricks, and how did it get started?
Yeah, so it started at UC Berkeley. So the co-founders of Databricks are researchers at UC Berkeley, and they created Apache Spark to make big data and artificial intelligence much simpler. We thought it's just way too hard.
Yeah.
And people are really struggling. There are few companies that are successful with it. How can we democratize it? How can we bring out that artificial intelligence to the rest of, say, Fortune 2000? So really what Spark did then was it unified big data processing with artificial intelligence. And that was also the mission of Databricks. So we had a hosted managed service in the cloud, which makes it really easy, it's fast, and it's really focused on collaboration and productivity. But we heard from our customers that over the last 2 years, that they really want Azure. It's an overwhelming demand for Azure.
Okay. Can you talk to me a little bit about this? Because I've heard that this is like a special partnership, is kind of how it was described. But what does it mean for Databricks to be on Azure?
Yeah, it's that the customers really were asking, we need compliance, we need security, we need scalability, and Azure has that. We need enterprise-grade cloud. So that's been the overwhelming feedback for several years now. And we have a service that's easy to use, it's fast, it has these collaborative features that make people more collaborative. So adding them together was a no-brainer. It seemed like an equation of 1 + 1 = 10.
So who do you see as the ideal Databricks on Azure customer?
So I see a lot of data scientists, a lot of data engineers, but also data analysts collaborating together to use Apache Spark and then have it be really tightly integrated, especially with the Azure whole stack, including the security pieces like Azure Active Directory, but also SQL Data Warehouse is really, really important. It has these elastic properties, the compute optimized tier that was announced recently. Customers are asking for that. So integrating that so that it's really native, integrated, and optimized so that you can seamlessly go back and forth between Azure Databricks and, say, Azure Data Warehouse, those are the really important things that we think our customers will benefit from.
And basically, I mean, if I'm understanding this correctly, the way this partnership is working is that it basically feels like it's a native kind of support service, right? Like this is, because sometimes, Azure will support certain things, but it will be through like a third party.
Correct.
But this feels like this is basically kind of like native support.
No, absolutely. And I think that is the one that's the thing that's really differentiated about how we sort of integrated Databricks into Azure. Because we have a marketplace where any third party can go build a solution. And this is not like that. This is really where, if Microsoft would have built this service, this is exactly what we have done. And
can you maybe talk about what went into that decision? You were saying that this partnership has been kind of a year in the making, but why was it important to have that kind of first party solution for this?
Overall, if you think about one of the big places where we're seeing a ton of demand is just the whole data analytics, specifically around not just the standard analytics that people do, but even machine learning and AI and intelligence. And there is an entire workflow where you ingest data, you store it in some sort of a scalable storage, you prepare data, create the model, eventually you do analytics and serve and do AI. And Spark, essentially Apache Spark, has become the de facto compute engine for a lot of the preparation work, for a lot of the machine learning, the experience that Databricks has built around notebooks for collaboration between data scientists and data professional data engineers is really standing out, right? So for us, getting this as a native service into Azure essentially completed that story. When you think about the modern data warehouse, which is really an aggregation of a lot of data, structured, unstructured, getting thrown into the lake, and then preparing the data to sort of serve it eventually for your regular BI and analytics that you do in the enterprise data warehouse, and more specifically where we're going towards with machine learning and artificial intelligence, this really completes that story for Azure in a very, very big way.
That's great. Ali, can you talk about some of the real-world examples where Databricks has solved like really complex problems for customers?
Yeah, I mean, in almost every vertical, we're active, and the things that people are doing with AI, with Databricks is amazing. In the healthcare space, we see a lot of customers that are using genomics data. So they have sequence data, they might have also patient record data, and they use AI to analyze that patient record data using Spark. It's natural language, so they're parsing the natural language and figuring out. They're building up these phenotype databases of what are the diseases that people have, and then they combine it with the genomics database that they have, where they have the sequenced genome data, and they'll see which genome is responsible for what disease, and then they can develop better drugs. That's a very common use case we see in the healthcare vertical. In mass media, a lot of it is around optimizing content.
Yeah.
What content should I be showing this particular viewer? So that they're engaged and they like it, yeah, and it's not going to be just bothering them, and it's just something that they're not interested in. There's massive data sets that they have on click streams, analyzing that, and then doing machine learning on it, and then predicting the content that users want to see. So there are a lot of different use cases in many different industries.
Yeah, that mass media, I think that's exciting to me personally, because I used to be in journalism. What types of challenges? What would you? Is there something that stands out as the most common kind of use case or kind of customer story? I mean, you obviously are in a lot of different industries, but would you say is there kind of a common reason why people are using Databricks or in Spark in general? Like, what's the main thing? Would you say?
It's really simple. If you go ask any CIO of any Fortune 10, 50, 500 company, how are you going to stay competitive in the next 10, 20 years? Chances are one of the things they're going to rattle off is artificial intelligence, big data analytics, right? So it's top of mind for everyone. And for every vertical you go to, they'll say, these are the use cases that we have. However, what they're struggling with is the big data piece. So all these data sets, they're massive, they're spread out in multiple different places. How can they organize it and get it in a form so that they can actually scale it and do machine learning on it? That's the hard part. That's really what Databricks Azure solves. So with Azure Databricks, it's much more seamless to grab your data wherever it is, whether it's in SQL Data Warehouse or whether it's in Azure Storage, and then combine it, do ETL on it, and then build machine learning models that can do these predictions for your enterprise.
That's great. So so instead of having to, because what you're describing is a pretty common scenario. It's disparate. It's located in a bunch of different places. You can run the analysis on it individually, but to try to do it all at one time.
Yeah. And iterating on it, because it's actually an iteration. So that's why it's so important that Azure Databricks is integrated tightly with Azure Storage, with Azure SQL Data Warehouse, with Azure ML, so that you can go back and forth. So you can use these different aspects of it. Then you can see if the results are not good, you can go back to Databricks and then tweak it a little bit and then keep iterating. And if you can make that iteration loop faster, then you can make people much more productive. And then that's when you can go to market much faster with products, and you can make your data scientists much more productive in their work.
I kind of asked this question when we had members of our AI team on. I'm going to ask you guys too, just because I know this is more of a platform level and this is more esoteric, but what do you think about what can be done, maybe even from a platform side and kind of from an infrastructure side, when it comes to things like detecting biases in AI models and things like that? Do you think about that at all?
Yeah, so most of this is done by our customers.
Yeah.
So they actually build models where they can figure out is there inherent bias in a particular model. What we help with is the governance of the models. You need to to be compliant, you need to have all these models around so that you can actually go back and say, was there bias in that model from a year ago? For instance, in the financial domain, we have a lot of companies, credit card companies and so on, that have a lot of data. They want to make sure that they haven't violated any compliance. And they have to go back to models and see, for instance, if we made a recommendation, was there any bias in it? So for that, we help with the governance piece. They build the actual bias detection.
They build the actual bias detection, but you make sure that they are following whatever protocols need to be followed.
Exactly.
And I imagine, you mentioned the financial industry, but I'm sure your earlier example about customer stories with healthcare, that has to be a huge one, where they have to make sure that they're within governance of what data they're collecting and how they're performing.
Security and compliance is number one on every customer's mind. That's why this partnership was so important to us. This is the number one thing everyone will quote. That oftentimes that will be a blocker. If they can't get the security to be perfect, and the security teams can't sign off, and they don't get the compliance they want, that's a showstopper for a project. And oftentimes, it might not stop the project, but it'll delay it by 3 months or 6 months. So
that's and that could be a blocker in and of itself.
Yes.
I mean, because if you're not coming to market fast enough, someone else might, or it might have other ramifications. So that's really interesting. Do you have any closing thoughts around anything else we should kind of be thinking about this?
Oh, it's a very exciting day. It's a lot of work that's gone on between the teams for the last year and a half. So it's really exciting to see that.
Well, congrats to everyone. I mean, this is exciting. And if you want to learn more, you can sign up for the preview at azure.com/Databricks. So thanks, both of you. Thank you so much. And we look forward to seeing what comes of this in the future, because I'm sure that we'll see even more stuff going forward.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Well, we are almost ready to start back into the live sessions. We're almost ready to start in the session aspect, where you can go really deep on some of this stuff, including all the people we've talked to today, and to kind of get you geared up for the second half of today at Connect, as well as days 2 and 3. Mr. Seth Juarez.
How are you doing, my friend?
I'm good. I'm good.
She's so much better at this than I am.
I'm not.
It's shameful.
I'm not. That's a lie. That's
shameful.
a lie. You are the man.
Thank you so much. By the way, this is probably one of the favorite parts of the job. How was it for you?
It was really good.
Oh, fantastic.
It was really good. Can I just say, your keynote,
Did you like it?
You were really good.
Well, she's saying that because we work together, and it'd be awkward, because our offices are next to each other.
And our desks in the studio next to each other. But I would say it even if we didn't work in close proximity to each other.
Well, you're so very nice. But I think the most important thing is we need to call out some of the sessions that are coming out.
Yes, we do.
Next. And so at 2 o'clock, we have Corey Sanders who's going to be talking about application modernization with Microsoft Azure.
Woohoo!
And then also we have Nat Friedman, build and ship apps faster with C# and Visual Studio Mobile Center. And there's going to be 2 streams, so you're going to be able to select.
So you can select which one you want. But if people happen to want to watch both things at once, these are going to be available later on Channel 9.
Oh,
correct?
fantastic. So
right?
yeah, everyone always asks, are these things going to be available later? Absolutely, they're going to be available. You can watch them on Channel 9 at your leisure. Okay, what else do we got going after that?
All right, we've got how to get started with Microsoft AI with Joseph, who was on earlier. This is your...
I'm going to go to that.
I was going to say, this is your session. This is what you care about. At the same time, we've also got a DevOps simplified session with Brian Harry. So whether you're into AI or DevOps, you've got something coming up, and that's starting at 3 o'clock.
That's right. And then coming up between 4 and 4:50, we're going to have Rohan back on again, talking about building intelligent apps with Microsoft Data Platform. Obviously, the Databricks announcement's pretty impressive.
Yeah,
very. Amazing.
And I'm sure that'll be a big component about what he talks about.
As well as developer tools for app innovation with Julia Lucen. I mean, we saw some of the tools today that are going to be embedded in, that you can download as extensions to Visual Studio, like Visual Studio Tools for AI. They're going to probably talk about a lot of other cool stuff there too.
Yeah. And then both Thursday and Friday, we've got more content, right?
That's right. I mean, there are 2 parallel live streams starting tomorrow. Deep dive breakout sessions, for example, tips and tricks for Visual Studio, language and Microsoft Cognitive Services, infusing language and speech. I mean, a lot of stuff that you've seen today, but more detail picked out of it, I think.
Okay, so the idea is that the breakout sessions today and the keynote today will give you a really good overview and let you kind of get a lot of meat. But if you want to get really nerdy about stuff and you want to be really granular, that's what's happening later on.
I'm down for getting nerdy about this stuff because, like I said,
I know you are. This is your passion,
yeah,
man.
I know. I love this stuff. And the cool thing is that some of these sessions are given, like, for example, Donovan Brown is rushing back to do some DevOps sessions tomorrow directly from Channel 9. We have a ton of other things happening there. And I just mentioned a couple of them, but I mean, for everyone that's watching, you're going to have a ton of content that you can look to. So much that you might be worried that you're not going to be able to see all of it. Don't worry. Again, it's recorded.
It's all recorded. It's all on Channel 9. What was your favorite thing?
Well, I really like.
Genuinely.
I don't know. I liked a lot of the features that Scott talked about. Like, for example, some of the stuff that happened in Kubernetes, like having a development cluster. I don't think it can be stated like concisely enough how hard it is to get an application that's distributed working. And now that you're able to, in a development Kubernetes environment, test everything out.
Test it out and make sure that it's working without, breaking code.
But beyond that, the thing that was most interesting to me was the fact that now, if I'm running into a problem inside of my Visual Studio IDE or Visual Studio Code, I can literally go and say, I need some help, and you can sit there and interactively tell me where I'm doing the wrong thing.
I love that. The live share thing was definitely really, really impressive. That was something I was excited about.
And last but not least, obviously, I'm a fan of AI. I loved all of the cool demos that we had in the second keynote. And what it was is it was there to show you that literally AI is something that we can start to put into our applications today without any problem. So, and we only got like 48 seconds left.
I know, we made it.
How should we use the time effectively?
I don't know. Do we want to dance?
I don't know. You probably don't want to watch me dance.
You definitely want to watch me dance.
Because it's just after lunch, and people might lose it. And I mean their lunch. So we got to be careful.
We got to be careful about that. All right. So, but we're going to continue to have content on the stream later today, Thursday, and Friday.
Yeah. So coming up. Just for those that are watching, I want you to know we have application modernization with Microsoft Azure. Corey Sanders is hilarious.
Yeah, he was on earlier, and he gave a preview of what's happening. So if you care, if you have an existing app and you're looking at modernizing it, check that out.
And building apps faster with C# Visual Studio Mobile.
All right.
Thanks so much.